The Red Cross is the largest humanitarian organization in the world, with some 300,000 volunteers. They respond to, on average, 64,000 disasters a year. Now, in 2017, the Red Cross actually responded to an unprecedented 7 major natural disasters within a 75-day period. And while disaster relief is a significant part of the mission of the Red Cross, it is only one part of the organization's broad scope and the impact that it has on our lives and the lives of our neighbors. Today, we are very delighted to be joined by the CEO of the American Red Cross, Gail McGovern. Gail is actually hosting us here on location at the American Red Cross. Gail, welcome.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Thanks for having me on this show.
Absolutely, we're delighted. So, Gail, you are the longest-serving female CEO of the Red Cross since its founding in 1836, right? I think only Clara Barton may have had a longer run.
I have a feeling I won't beat Clara Barton's run. She had a
23-year
run with the American Red Cross.
You have led the organization through a very significant transformation, bringing almost 30 years of expertise as a corporate executive at both AT&T and later Fidelity, and also as an academic at Harvard Business School. We're going to talk all about that and your leadership and how it differs, but let's jump right into the mission of the Red Cross. I mean, a lot of folks, I think, know the Red Cross, of course, but probably don't understand all the things that it does.
Well, first of all, you mentioned that we respond to 64,000 disasters every year, and that always surprises people. I mean, most of these were not on the news. People don't know about it. Most of them are home fires. And they are caused usually by cooking accidents. And they're preventable. And the death and injury that occurs from these home fires are also preventable. About 2,500 people die every year in home fires, and another 13,000 are injured. So we've got a big focus on safety, on ensuring people have smoke alarms. But every single day in D.C., there are going to be between 8 and 10 home fires in the next 24 hours. And that's pretty typical of all large cities. So it's something that's very much part of our mission. What most people don't know is the work we do for the military. We handle about 400,000 calls every year from members of the military, their families, veterans. Some of them are emergency calls, like get my son home, his father's on his deathbed, or get my husband home, he's about to become a father for the first time. And we also get calls from veterans that have issues, that are having a hard time making a mortgage payment, for example. We have volunteers in every VA hospital. We have volunteers on every military base, including in theater. We have volunteers in Afghanistan and Iraq, for example. So this is very important to our mission. It's pretty much the least known part of what we do, but I have to say, if I run into somebody in a uniform and I'm wearing my Red Cross pin and I thank them for their service, they usually will tell me a Red Cross story. So that's a very important part of what we do. We also provide about 40% of the nation's blood supply. And in order to do that, every day, 15,000 people have to show up at a blood drive, and they open up their veins to save the life of a complete stranger. It's a remarkable thing to see, and I love talking to our blood donors because they're just so selfless doing this incredible act. And of course, we teach first aid, CPR, lifeguarding lessons, swimming lessons, babysitting lessons. We do about 6 million of those every year. And it's very usual for me to go into a city and be recognizing an ordinary person that did a dramatic thing and saved someone's life.
Tell me a story. I know you must hear thousands and thousands of stories of how these various efforts, and certainly the training programs, ultimately pay off. Give me an example.
Oh my gosh, I can just give you so many. First of all, the first person that came to mind was an 11-year-old girl who took a babysitting class and saved her 3-year-old sister from choking. Grandparents that were taking a walk in Minnesota heard screaming, ran over to a lake where a 4-year-old child fell through the ice. And they pulled that kid out and did CPR on her for 20 minutes before the paramedics came. And that child is as right as rain now. It's really amazing. It's just over and over again. Just people that spring into action and don't stand there like helpless bystanders. And it's very empowering to take the training, because you know that if, heaven forbid, you walk into a situation like that, you'll know what to do.
Over the weekend, as I was preparing for the interview this morning, my daughter was having a play date with a friend. She's 8. And she said, "What are you doing, Mommy?" And I told her. And she said, show me some of those videos. So we pulled up some of the training videos, because she's an aspiring babysitter. And I think they're incredibly well done, but they're also simple enough that even someone who's as young as 8, 9, or 10, I mean, an 8-year-old doesn't need to be babysitting, so make no mistake, she won't be anytime in the next little while. But to give her some sense that she too can help save a life, I think that's really, really empowering.
Absolutely. And even at 8, if she recognizes some of these warning signs, she'll know to pick up the phone and dial 911.
Yeah.
And I highly recommend that everybody take a CPR first aid course, because they say that 27% of us are going to happen upon someone that's in cardiac arrest in our lifetimes. And I can't imagine anything as heartbreaking as just standing there and not knowing what to do.
Absolutely. So let's go back to the disaster relief piece. That's such a big piece of what the Red Cross does. And I think folks would be fascinated, I would be fascinated in understanding the anatomy of the disaster relief. So what happens? Like, when do you get the call, and what happens, especially with something that's a large-scale disaster like we saw so many of last fall?
Well, let me start with the smallest disasters that we respond to, and then I'll take you all the way to the other end. When there's a home fire, we get dispatched by the local fire department, because they know that we're going to come and offer help. And one of the most stunning Red Cross stories I've heard, a volunteer told me that she was dispatched in the middle of the night, and she usually just kind of gets the general area, but when she's on the street, she just waits till she sees the fire engines as she's driving along. And she said she was driving down the street, she couldn't find any fire engines. She came upon a multi-dwelling home where 12 people were sitting on the stoop, and behind them was nothing. The entire house burnt down, and they were just sitting there. And she jumped out of the car and she said, "Where's the fire department?" And one of the gentlemen on the stoop said they had to respond to another fire, but they said, "Just wait, because the Red Cross will come. They always come." I mean, that family needed a place to stay. They needed food, they needed clothing, and this is what we do over and over again, about 64,000 times a year. Mm-hmm. And then when it comes to big disasters, it really depends on what type of disaster it is. There are disasters that give you a lot of notice, like a hurricane. And so we will track where that hurricane is coming, and then we will send in supplies and food and cots and blankets and emergency response vehicles to the whole area where they're predicting it might land.
Do you have infrastructure here at the Red Cross to monitor hurricanes as they're coming?
We certainly do. We do have infrastructure. In fact, we have a disaster operations center. We have a situation room right in this headquarters building that pipes in what we see in that operations center. We have digital operations centers so we can monitor social media, which is very helpful, because we will see tweets that say, "I'm in Far Rockaway, can you please send something, because the Red Cross isn't here yet." And so in real time, we can start directing food trucks, etc., to take care of people. And we have several of them around the country as well. And we're very linked into the Weather Channel, so you can watch some of these disasters literally formulating out in the ocean and then start predicting where you think it's going to land. And we will pre-position supplies around where they're predicting it will land. That doesn't mean when they strike that there aren't access problems. In Houston, our biggest problem was all the roads turned into raging rivers. And getting people in there, getting the supplies, the cots, the blankets, the volunteers, it was next to impossible. And we tried to commission some high water vehicles from the Department of Defense, but it was taking a while for the requisition to go through. So we called the city and got dump trucks. And we threw our volunteers on these dump trucks. And it was somewhat dangerous having them go back and forth, but we broke through and were able to get volunteers and supplies to a huge shelter. It was a convention center that we were using as a shelter.
How about the staffing and mobilization of volunteers? I have always been fascinated and curious about how that happens. You have people presumably ready to go, but how do you mobilize them? What does that look like?
Well, first of all, one of the things I love about the American Red Cross is our volunteers. They are amazing. And whenever I go to a disaster, I meet people that have been deployed 10, 15, 20 times. They just see a need, and they're such humanitarians, they have to get up and go into action, and they have to fulfill it. We have a big IT platform where volunteers can register, and then we can deploy them so we know where they are and we know how to reach them. And as soon as we see a disaster formulating, we start placing calls. So, and it is just amazing. Every time, this past fall, for example, there were just so many back-to-back disasters. Every time I would think, I just hope they come. I just hope they come. And there they are. There they are, living in rough conditions. We put them, several in a hotel room or staff shelters where they're sleeping on cots. And they don't complain. They just keep a smile on their face and give out lots of hugs and comfort. It's an amazing thing. And it lifts your heart to know that there's just such generosity in our country. I mean, it really does lift your heart.
Yeah. Let's talk about your tenure here at the American Red Cross. You joined the organization 10 years ago in 2008 at a very, what I think is fair to say, a financially troubled time. The organization had $209 million in operating debt and was literally borrowing money, as I understand it, to make payroll. Really a horrible situation for any organization, much less a charity, to be in. What was that like?
Oh, my goodness. So walking into the Red Cross, I knew we were struggling financially, so I expected that. What I didn't appreciate was the love that employees have for the American Red Cross. And so I walked in thinking this is going to be a massive culture change, and that's going to be problematic. But I have to tell you, this place is so mission-driven that when you tell them, and these are exactly the words I used, I said, we have to save the American Red Cross. We have to. The country needs a vibrant, robust American Red Cross. We have to save the Red Cross. It was so galvanizing for the folks, and so many people stepped up. I mean, we had to do some pretty drastic things in those first couple of years. We withheld our merit increases, we withheld the 401k match, and once we were able to right the ship, obviously we lifted those restraints, but people did not complain. The only time I heard complaints is when we had to do layoffs. And the complaints weren't from the people that were getting laid off. It was the people that stayed. I vividly remember getting an email from someone that said, Angelo is a single parent, and he's taking care of a child with disabilities. Can you give him half my salary so he can stay?
Oh, wow.
It was unbelievable. I mean, in corporate America, I've experienced layoffs, and it's horrible. but people power through it and they move on. In a humanitarian organization, when people are looking at the right and left of them and they see some empty cube next to them, it's heartbreaking. But I have to say, everyone stepped up, and it took 2 years to eliminate the operating deficit, and we've been steadily paying off all that debt. But it was not an easy time, but it just made me fall in love with the Red Cross. I mean, it really did. I thought, this is an organization that will embrace change if they understand the change through the lens of the mission.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you're drawing on some 30 years of corporate experience and also experience as an academic as well. That's really useful, but this is a very different situation that you're coming into. Let's talk a little bit about those differences, the training that you had and how that was really helpful, but then the big differences that you saw, some of which obviously the very mission-driven mentality would be one, but what else did you see? What are those differences?
Well, first of all, what I was able to bring to the Red Cross was just experience in running lines of business. So I knew how to read financial statements. I could see when we were struggling. I had techniques to reduce expenses and to improve fundraising, for example. But it's very different leading here than anything I ever experienced. And honestly, I think I've learned more about leadership being at the Red Cross than I did at any other point in my career. When you are leading a volunteer force of 300,000 people, you cannot just say, hey, jump, and have them say, how high? It's just not going to work. So you can say, okay, jump, and they will say, no, you haven't convinced me yet. And it's a really fair thing to say. It's not like I can take away their salary or, give them a bonus if they decide to, follow direction. You have to lead through the power of your ideas, not through the power of your office. And that was both humbling but also really liberating, because once you embrace that, people are following you because they think you're doing the right thing, not because, you're directive and you can, influence them in a negative way. So it really taught me also to lead from the heart, which was something I probably should have done more in corporate. I was a kind boss and very participative boss, and I'd always hear everybody's opinions, but I was pretty logical in my approach, and I would persuade people through the logic of what we were working on and how to improve shareholder value, for example. I've changed my leadership style since I've been here. And honestly, I wish I could go back in a time machine and do it when I was in corporate America, because I think it would have had some really positive results. Everybody wants to be part of a higher purpose. Everybody does. And, when I was at AT&T, people would get all wound up over something, and I would say, calm down. It's just telephone service. We are not saving lives here. Just take a deep breath. And at Fidelity, I would say, calm down, we're just managing money, we're not saving lives here, everybody take a deep breath. Then I come here, that is not gonna work because we are saving lives every day. So I've learned to talk through the mission, and it's really what gets people motivated. So, if I could do that time machine thing, I would go back to AT&T and say, people, this is important work. We're connecting others to, people that they love. We're making businesses run by giving them the data that they need. We've got to get this right. Mm-hmm. And I think that would have been very motivating. Like I said, I think I was a motivational leader, but there's a way to do that. And I don't care if you're manufacturing widgets or you're at the American Red Cross. There are ways to do that that can help people feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves.
Mm-hmm. How can you impart some of that wisdom on your sort of former colleagues in corporate America? There is a lot of discussion about purpose-driven initiatives and aligning your people around a purpose, but your experience has been very different. Would you have advice for people at the C-suite, CEO level for how to internalize that in a different way, given the experience that you've had here?
Well, I have to say I struggled with it a little bit in the beginning because, I so vividly recall a meeting that we had of our 160 biggest chapter executives. And it was when I was trying to lay out a strategy to get them to understand that we needed to reduce expenses. And it was right when I first got there. And I could tell that they were not really all that interested in me laying out, all the logic and all the stuff. They were very skeptical. And they were trying to figure out, whether or not I even got it, And so I got up and I actually surprised myself. Because I got myself kind of wound up. I got very passionate. And I said, we have got to do this. We've got to do this. The lives are depending on us. And the night before, I checked a bunch of their websites. And I went around the room and I said, who would put the blankets around the people that landed in that plane in the Miracle on the Hudson?
Yeah.
And who would respond to that 4-alarm fire in Buffalo, New York? I went around the room and I could see they thought, she gets it. Later, when I sat down, I thought, God, that felt kind of sappy. But I looked around that audience and I thought, they're going to be able to get behind this. And so the advice I give is, it's a little unnerving. Purpose-driven leadership, it's like, it can't just be a platitude. It's a little unnerving when you let yourself get emotional at work. Mm-hmm. But boy, it just makes people want to follow you, particularly millennials. They're like, show me how this is going to help the world. And if you can do that, it really will make a difference. So it's scary. It's like jumping off the diving board into the deep end of the pool. But once you do it, it becomes a technique. And even more importantly, it becomes part of who you are. Mm-hmm. And it's made me a kinder, more generous, gentle person, I think.
So looking back over the last 10 years, what are you most proud of? The world looks pretty different here at the Red Cross compared to the way it looked in 2008. What are you most proud of?
Well, I guess my legacy is going to be that we helped turn around the place, which is very gratifying. But if you ask me what I want my legacy to be, I really am attempting to make this the best place in the world to work or to volunteer. And I'm trying to create a culture where people collaborate, they like each other, it's diverse, it's inclusive, people feel safe, they have different approaches to respond to problems so that we have lots of point of view and we don't make mistakes. I just want a culture where the employees and volunteers feel engaged, valued, and love coming to work in the morning. So if that becomes my legacy, I'll feel like I really did something at the American Red Cross.
Yeah. I've seen where you're employing the town hall concept, which is fairly typical in large corporate organizations, but probably a bit atypical for a philanthropy or a nonprofit. Is that part of that strategy as well?
So I've been doing them literally since I joined the Red Cross, and it's fun to do. It's also a little bit nerve-wracking because we use technology to reach thousands of people. And you never know when it's going to go down, and everything is a little bit fragile. But I have to say, I love doing it. I love getting the feedback from it. I always end with something about the mission, and I love talking about our mission. The latest round that I did, I really made it personal, more than I normally do, because I've got this 10-year milestone coming up, so I'm kind of looking back as well as forward. And I just talked about how the mission has touched me personally on so many different levels. And so I enjoy doing it. I've, over this period of time of doing it, I get a lot of great support from it. It takes a little out of me. and each time I do it, I do about 4 or 5 of them.
Wow.
Yeah, and so...
And they're live.
And they're live, and so I keep
questions.
saying the same thing again and again, and I'm thinking, whoa, am I even making sense anymore?
Did I just say that?
Did I just say that? I have a lot of that, did I just say that moments, but it's very gratifying, and it keeps it real. It really keeps it real.
Let's talk about leadership lessons, right? Combining your corporate experience with your nonprofit experience, what leadership lessons would you impart on others as they're, especially those who are just embarking on their career and thinking about what path they may want to go down, and the value that you no doubt have seen from this notion of cross-sector leadership? Talk a little bit about your leadership philosophy and what you've learned because of those dual experiences.
Well, we covered the notion of leading from the heart, and I would impart that advice quite a bit. I also think the most important thing you can do as a leader is pick good people. And in fact, I'm going to correct myself there. Not good people, the best people. We all think we're frustrated missionaries, and that if we bring somebody in and they have some rough edges, that we're going to be able to smooth them out. But I have to say, over time, I've learned that for the most part, people don't change. They change a little bit on the margins, but they don't fundamentally change their character. So I always am really careful when I staff, and I have the best senior leadership team at my table right now than I have ever had in any other job. I mean, they're remarkable. And that's what enables us to do everything we do. So I tell people, if you have a 1% nagging doubt that the person you're considering for the job isn't going to work out, don't hire them. Just wait. Wait. It is so much easier to wait than staff for expediency and then have to dig out of a personnel problem. And you want to staff for chemistry. You're going to bring somebody into your team. You want to make sure that they get along. And you've got to staff for diversity of thought. Because if everyone around your table is like-minded, you're going to make a million mistakes. If there's somebody that disagrees with somebody else and they can attack each other's ideas, not each other, you get so much more done. And the other piece of advice I would give is to really learn to embrace change. Because in this world, if you can't, you're going to just get into all kinds of trouble. And accept the fact that if you're going to embrace change, that you're going to make calls that turn out to be wrong, and admit those mistakes immediately and course correct. And if you admit the mistake immediately and course correct, people have way more respect for you. It's stunning when you do that. They'll say, okay, I'll try this because I know if you made a bad call, you'll fix it. And so often I've seen that at the Red Cross. They're scratching their heads and saying, all right, let's try it because this leadership team will course correct if they have to. Resiliency is really important when you're a leader. Mm-hmm. Even if you don't feel it, act it, and pretty soon you will feel it. If you don't model optimism, people are going to fall apart around you. And that's a really important thing I've learned as well.
Let's dig into that concept of resiliency in particular. It can be closely tied to self-doubt. And as women, sometimes, present company perhaps excluded, I don't know.
No, definitely included.
For most of us, it's something that we carry around in a way that I think in a more acute way sometimes than men do. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with a setback? How do you employ that notion of resiliency?
Well, first of all, I think every human being on this planet has an insecure 17-year-old somewhere inside of them. You just have to shut that person up. So, I like to think of myself a bit like a perfectionist. I know I have that problem. But I've learned over time to forgive myself. And if you don't forgive yourself and you keep hitting yourself in the back and saying, why did I do that? Why did I do that? You're not doing yourself any favors, but more importantly, you're not doing your team any favors. If they see that, they're all going to start spiraling. And, if you're pessimistic, they're going to be more pessimistic. If you're optimistic, they'll be optimistic. And I've just learned, my brother taught me this thing. He's 6'5". He weighs about 220 pounds. So there was only one sport the two of us could do together, and it was bowling. So this is back in the day where the bowling machines weren't automated. So you had these little yellow pencils like you see on the golf course, and you could fill in your spares and your strikes and everything else. And my brother he has this innate ability to just let things roll off his back. And he would do this thing when we were bowling. He would have a really bad couple of frames, and then he would take this little yellow pencil and he'd draw a thick line. And I'd say, "What is that?" And he said, "It's my serious bar. From now on, I'm only throwing strikes." And it kind of worked for him. So I just draw myself a mental serious bar. I say, "Okay, I messed that up, but from now on, I'm going to take us this way, and I'm going to forgive myself, and I'm going to only throw strikes." So it's not always easy to do. There are times when I come home, and if I had one, I would kick the dog or whatever. But I just over time, I've realized that you're not doing yourself any good. You're not doing the institution any good. And you've got to compartmentalize it and keep moving on. And sometimes it's hard. I mean, every once in a while, I'd have a problem and it would not roll off my back. When my daughter was very young, I recall a time, I lost a big client to MCI, which is a big telecom firm back in the day. And I usually could, really shake it off before I came home and saw her. But I walked in the front door and she was bouncing up and down, "Mommy, Mommy, Mommy." And I said, "Annie, take it easy. Mommy has the blues." And she said, "What are the blues?" I said, "It means Mommy's sad." And she said, "Why are you sad?" And I said, "Well, there's this company called Mean MCI, and they stole one of Mommy's customers." I wanted to talk to somebody, and she was it. That was all that was home. And she goes, "Well, why don't you steal one of their customers?" And I started laughing, and she started laughing. I'm driving to work the next morning, and I'm thinking, that was not such a bad idea. So we actually put a smoking deal in front of one of MCI's customers. It was the last time she came up with any good ideas.
That's awesome.
But I do tell people, tell your problems to a toddler and they'll really seem ridiculous.
Right. So this job is very consuming. I'm sure all of your jobs have been largely consuming. You were in a corporate scenario, very demanding jobs. This is different. This can be consuming on multiple levels, and especially on the emotional level, I would think. How do you deal with that?
So, first of all, it's a great question. I used to give talks on work-life balance when I was in corporate America. I mean, I was a senior officer at AT&T. I was running $500 billion of assets in Fidelity, and I was really good at work-life balance.
And you had two children.
And
right?
one child.
One child.
And I was really good at work-life balance. Like, I got home, I relieved the nanny on time every day. I could talk about it endlessly. I mean, I worked all night while the kid was asleep, but nevertheless, I was really good at it. And then I came here. And I don't know if it's the mission of the Red Cross that gets under your skin, or the fact that I arrived here concurrently with my daughter going off to college, and so there was not that enormous pressure on me to get home on time. And I have a husband who is completely supportive and flexible, so he doesn't stop me. But I've learned that work has, kind of subsumed me, but I like it. I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but I'm sort of built to work. So work has become a bigger part of my life, but it's a part of my life that I really enjoy. Now, the part of your question that's harder to answer is what about the emotionalism? Because every once in a while, something will absolutely knock the stuffing out of me. I mean, I recently came back from Parkland, Florida, and honestly, I wasn't right for several days. And it was, I was just sad. And, I had to pull it up when I came here, but when I came home, I was still sad. Having said that, when I see our mission in action, there's so many people that are weepy because they lost their homes, or they had practically nothing and now they really have nothing and they're living in a Red Cross shelter. But what I see over and over again is people pulling it up. They say, they tell me their story, I get a little weepy. And by the way, I never cried in corporate America. I don't know. It's a good week if I'm not crying here. So, I get a little weepy. They get a little weepy. I give them a hug, and then they say, "Oh, no, don't worry. They're telling me this. I'm going to be all right. My family is okay. I'll figure it out." And I hear, my dog is okay. I have God. My friends are okay. I mean, I just hear this over and over again. And so you walk out feeling grateful for what you have, in awe of the resiliency of the American public. And I also get to see the generosity of the American public, donating blood, volunteering their time, giving financial donations. I mean, I feel like I'm the luckiest person in the world because I'm in this job. And when people talk about, oh, it's so divisive right now, I think, well, not my country. I see generosity. I see resiliency. I don't see political strife day to day in my job.
Yeah.
So
that raises a really interesting question too. There's been so much discussion of othering and tribalism, and use whatever terminology you want to use. There have been some really smart, poignant articles written recently about this notion. How does that come into play as it relates to the mission of the Red Cross? Because you have all different types of people all mixed together who are dealing with these tragedies in many cases. How do you look at this notion? What's your perspective?
Well, this is another reason why I feel so grateful to work here. We have 7 fundamental principles, and this isn't the American Red Cross, it's the entire Red Cross movement. And 3 of those principles are actually, to my way of thinking, really redundant. It's impartiality, independence, neutrality, and they're all basically saying the same thing, which is we do not take political sides. We do not advocate for a political side. Anybody is welcome into our shelter, anybody. We don't ask for credentials, we don't ask questions. If you are in need, you're welcome in our shelter. And as a result, I make visits at the Hill often, but nobody there knows my political party, and they understand the neutrality of the American Red Cross. It is so liberating to be able to have constant conversations with people that don't get into this. And it's even more liberating to see people working side by side. I mean, it's unbelievable. We have so many volunteers in the faith-based community. I mean, during Hurricane Harvey, we had a lot of Red Crossers internationally come and help us out. So we had the Mogen David Adom, the Israeli Red Cross, Islam Relief, hanging out together at, responding to disasters. You name a faith-based organization, they're in our shelters. It's, you put on a Red Cross vest and you're a Red Cross volunteer. You're not a Republican, you're not a Democrat, you're not going to be arguing, you're a Red Cross volunteer, and we stay away from politics. And as a result, I know there are tribes out there. I'm beginning to learn to hate that term, but I know they're out there, but I don't have to engage in it. Nobody really has to. And it's a gift you get when you're a Red Crosser.
So this is going to be a really tough one. You've made a couple of career transitions, fairly big ones. We've talked a good bit about. How do you know? How do you know when it's time to transition or when it's time to leave something that you've been working on? How do you know?
Wow, that is a great question. So I honestly cannot think of a job that I had. My first job I got when I was 14 that I really didn't like. Well, I once worked in an ice cream factory. I could think of better jobs than that. It was kind of a strange one, but I just love to work. When I'm not learning, that's when I think it's time to go. And I was so fortunate at AT&T. I had this career where I enjoyed the lattice as much as I enjoyed the ladder. So, if I felt like I wasn't learning, I would start chatting with my boss and saying that there are opportunities, elsewhere in the organization. I'm not asking for permission, I just want to learn. And so I moved around quite a lot. And that's why I was able to stay there for 24 years. I just kept learning, and as long as I think of myself as being very intellectually curious, and as long as there's a puzzle or a challenge and I'm learning new things, I'm totally motivated. That's one of the beauties of the Red Cross. There's always something new. There's always something to tackle. When I was at AT&T, I finished running 2 of the biggest business units. So it was pretty much the whole company. And I was doing consumer marketing, and back then there weren't interesting channels like there are today. It was TV and telemarketing. And I thought, I've got to learn something new. And that's when I knew it was time to go to Fidelity. And then I kind of got the itch to give back, and that's what sent me to Harvard. There were a lot of firms that were falling apart, like Enron and WorldCom, and I thought, if I could influence tomorrow's leaders. It took me about 2 classes to realize those students are smarter than I was. They were teaching me more than I was teaching them. I had some street smarts, but they were really bright. So it didn't quite scratch the itch to give back, but I loved it. And then when I got the call to join the Red Cross, that's when I thought, this is really giving back. And that's when I was able to make the move. So I hope that answered the question for you.
It does. No, it's great.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really tough question, and I think for each person it's very personal, but it's helpful to hear how someone else has thought about that, who's made these career transitions.
I do have one other comment to make about it. I have noticed sometimes that particularly women feel like, okay, I didn't get a good performance appraisal. They know intellectually that it's a chemistry problem between them and their boss, but they firmly believe if they keep working really hard and show their stuff, that they will get promoted. It's not going to happen. Sometimes 2 people just don't get along, and there's a chemistry problem. So the other thing I've learned is stop hitting your head against a brick wall, and this is when I was younger, rising in business. You're not going to convince someone to like you if they don't. Mm-hmm. And it may not be you, it could be them. So the advice I give to young people is remember that lattice. You go into that boss and say, I have learned so much from you, and I want to keep learning. So is there another opportunity that I can have that's not a promotion? They'd probably be relieved, you'll be relieved, and then you just restart and try again.
That's great advice, really great advice. Okay, how can our listeners, if they are interested in volunteering and helping at the American Red Cross, what's the best way to go about that?
Well, first of all, they can walk right into their local chapter if they want, but if they don't want to leave their home, all they have to do is get on our website, redcross.org, and it will put you on a place where you can figure out where you want to volunteer and what you'd like to do. It will show you where you can go to donate blood. It will also show you if you want to make a financial donation. We always need volunteers, and we always need new blood donors. And everything we do everything is because of the generosity of the American public. So we can always use financial donations as well.
That's terrific. Gail, thank you so much.
It's such a pleasure.
We could talk forever. This is so amazing. So thank you so much for doing
Thank you, Laura.
this.
Thanks.
And thanks everyone for listening. To learn more about Gail and the tremendous work that she and her team and these amazing volunteers are doing here at the American Red Cross, you can visit our website at www.shesaidshesaidpodcast.com. We'll include links to the Red Cross as well as some specifics around some initiatives that Gail and her team have underway. Thanks for listening.